And everybody's having half of this plan and half of that plan,
Well,
and
yeah,
then they complain and don't learn about the results. They don't seem to study what
well,
happens as a result.
there's obviously people, in my opinion, who are worthy of, who have something to say, and then people who just don't have anything useful to contribute. I mean, there's racists, who have an
Yeah.
argument, and racists who don't have an argument, right?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, one kind of troll or one kind of asshole is tolerable just because at least they have an argument.
I think I used to think it was more smart people though, but it's not, because there's people on YouTube I talk with people mentally handicapped. They'll tell you mentality of a 12-year-old, plenty useful to talk to. And I think I used to maybe think that it had more to do with like how well you could think things through on this IQ kind of level, and really it's something else. Because some of the biggest assholes, the most useless to listen to, and YouTube shows this well, are plenty smart. I mean, TA and Thunderfoot are plenty smart people if it was just being smart enough made it worthwhile to listen. And it doesn't help.
I think it's a range of subjects, though. There's people who are good at a lot of subjects and some people who aren't, okay? So I guess I'd always put those in the category where I don't think they're as good at just doing logic. You know what I mean? Like, if you know logic, you can take on almost any subject because you have thought processes that get you to the truth.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
You have the garbage in principle.
Well, I'm just saying that you have a mechanics to work with so you can make rational sense out of a position. You know what I'm saying? You know how to argue it even. Where Thunderfoot, I mean, there's obviously fields where he's way out of his element. I mean, we start talking about rape and shit, and he just he hasn't even imagined what it is to be a woman in our society. You know what I mean? So he hasn't obviously taken the first step to really understand the issue. Like the same way he would approach a scientific question, he doesn't approach these other social questions. So I see Thunderfoot having a huge void because he doesn't use any discipline in how he thinks.
So people don't want to improve that unless they see the reward, right? And that's the hard part. It's like, what's the reward? Getting people to face reality or be a little bit relativistic about it and say, hey, before you start analyzing this, put yourself in the position of people that have been around you. They don't want to, and unless you say it's part of the secret, and they're going to instantly get a new benzo.
But it is part of the secret, though, and it is part of the thing where first you have to get people to actually look at it and say, well, is there a truth to this fact that people tend to be full of shit when they think with their ass? You know, and so I mean, I'm just saying that I think there's a way for people to be humbled, okay? Because everybody thinks they're entitled to opinions, right? But they don't have to do any research. They don't have to know what the fuck they're talking about. All they have to do is hear some asshole, Ron Paul or somebody say it's an inside job, and that's
or the Bitcoin.
That's all the evidence I need. Well, yeah, Bitcoin's a good example.
I've been arguing with people about Bitcoin about how it's unhackable, and I'm like, dudes, I read the actual paper of what it's about. And even if I hadn't, it's just a piece of software that a bunch of people are writing different versions of. Some of them are going to be hackable.
The whole
and people are like, no, you don't understand it.
The whole thing is, and they're thinking of this thing in the wrong way anyway, as if, why are you making a currency anyway when all this is supposed to be for is transactions? Right? It's not. It's supposed to be a temporary.
That's right.
It's supposed to only exist for a few milliseconds.
So how'd you find that out? That's right.
The white paper, through the space.
It's a big ledger.
Right. Yeah. So it's not even supposed to be something you could hoard in the first place.
It's more like for house keys.
There shouldn't even be a vault you could put a fucking Bitcoin in. Inventing a vault was the mistake.
It's kind of weird.
Okay, because that's what this went. This is where this all went wrong, is that people had vaulted Bitcoins. Okay, and it makes them essentially inaccessible digitally. You almost have to create a hardware request, a paper request, to get those Bitcoins back into the real world again.
Yeah.
Okay? But that was the mistake. Why did you create a synthetic currency and then make it real?
Yeah.
I mean, what's the point? You created a piece of paper, right? You authorized its existence through somebody having to generate authority. So why... haven't you just created a note? And didn't you just create cash?
Yeah, totally.
So what's the fucking point?
Yeah.
I mean, if the Bitcoin is something I can just write on a piece of paper, and now I own it, I've just turned it into a piece of paper.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a distributed ledger. It shouldn't be possible.
Yeah, and it should be just something that you initiate a transaction, the Bitcoin goes or it doesn't go. That's it. You know what I'm saying? It should exist for one purpose, to go from here to go to there, and that's the only purpose it should exist for. So I'm just waiting for somebody to come up with whatever sensible coin, or Digicoin, or some other mechanism.
I do think there's something to the way it's being done. Yeah.
I mean, the idea of doing these transactions, they're just bank transactions, and so all you need really is a network that is connected to all the doors to the banks, right?
Which is supposedly how it's designed, actually.
Well, I'm just saying, the other half of it is connected to your authorization. So all you're really talking about is, can we trust this guy's bank account? And so, yeah, if all the banks are connected, then you should be able to make these transfers for almost, pennies a transfer.
Yeah. Well, that part worked.
Just to get rid of this whole PayPal.
Well, but how we got on this Bitcoin is just part of the problem is people didn't really understand what they're having. They believe some amount of hype about its invulnerability.
Well, they saw the word coin. They saw the word coin and said it's something to buy. And it's not something to buy. It's not a commodity. They want to commoditize everything. They want to monetize everything, and it's like you're just missing the whole point.
So I think one thing too is, like, when I was younger, I also was thinking, find a good philosophy, and it's supposed to be the good way to live, and really, it's more like finding out how to think about things. It has helped me make it through hardship, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily helped me avoid hardships.
Well, I think there is.
It helps me survive them, but not avoid them.
Obviously, I think if you take it to its, if you go all the way with this dissection, this reductionism that everybody hates, right? But if you take that reductionism seriously, I don't think there's any other wall than you're going to hit. Is this wall where, life is just dangerous as fuck. And it is.
Well, and that's why you end up anti-natalist.
Well, I'm just saying that's why you just end up in this situation where you say, this is precious commodities controlled by crude forces, and you can't escape the crude forces. The crude forces have the power. We can just fiddle with them on the margins, but they have all the power. The earthquakes have the power. The tornadoes have the power. The hurricanes, carbon has the power. The power is in the forces. It's in the meteorite heading for Earth right now. It's in the meteor heading for the moon that's going to shoot a bunch of meteors at us. You know what I'm saying? I mean, at any moment we're vulnerable, okay?
But I've never had a problem with that. Like, I think when you go through a natural disaster, as terrifying and tragic as it can be, it's not the same as getting fucked over out there in the world the way everybody does.
Well, they
you know what I
mean?
Like, we could make our houses and towns.
Those are just the gorillas. Those are the human gorillas that are part of the crude, right?
Well, that's the question. Then. Can you train them? They're the ones that got to be trained out of it.
Part of the crude forces. So I'm just saying, you got rid of the human factor. I'm just saying you're still stuck with the natural factor. That's still this.
But you do the math. If we were fighting nature with our war budget, we'd be fine. Everybody'd be rich.
You keep going back to the same argument that nobody disagrees with. But I'm just saying me and you aren't going to disagree with it, but I'm just saying pragmatically we can do nothing about that. So that's not a place we can pull victory from. And we know that doesn't even matter, right? It doesn't matter whether you're $40,000 or $70,000 overdrafted on your credit card, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you can't pay either one. So we know that it's all an illusion anyway because we're bankrupt.
Yeah.
So you could say that, well, we could all be rich. Well, we really can't all be rich because the only thing keeping the economy going is this fake money they keep putting on the credit card.
Well, my optimism, though, is that there is a lot of, people that want to make things better, and we argue a lot of times about not knowing what they are. And so I just feel like there's a lot of confusion inserted into the culture that's making people that want to make things better feel and be ineffectual. Right. And people that want to just go rape, they invent fracking, and then boom, they're doing great.
The thing is crashing, and you think, okay, we can deflect, and we can fly a little bit, and then we can bounce, and we can fly a little bit.
Just that it's possible.
I know, but
not
I'm just
that
saying,
we will.
I'm just saying.
Looks like we're going into the ground.
I'm just saying the real game to play is just to minimize the losses. Take the gasoline out of the tank. Jettison the weight, make this as graceful a squish as possible because there's no way to survive it. There's no way to bounce off of it. Let's just gracefully.
Well, if the current system ends, it's supposed to do in a crisis. It's designed to end in a crisis. Yeah.
Well, I know, but a crisis isn't just like, okay, it's over. We hit the brick wall and we're dead. No, we're going to end up buried under 5 million tons of rubble. We're going to be sawing our own legs
and by the time we dig ourselves out, the rats will have taken over the surface again.
We're going to saw our legs off, and then we're going to crawl to the surface and be one-legged, and it's going to be a slow, miserable, horrid death. I'm just saying.
But you think that's going to happen? I mean, because you don't spend a lot of time on the collapse issue.
Well, it's going to be dystopia. Yeah, I mean, we're not going to. That's what I'm
Well,
worried
how long
about.
do you think it's
okay,
going to take?
The end is going to look. The end is happening. Okay, we're going to crash into the carbon wall, or we're going to crash into the economy wall, but we're going to crash.
You mean who we though? 100
well, I mean,
years?
we, the planet Earth, yeah,
It's
going
gonna
to happen
when?
soon, okay?
Yeah.
It's not going to happen, you know.
1,000 years.
We're not going to be here 100 years from now as a civilization.
Yeah, it looks like it's within a century to me
know,
too.
There's a big bang coming, and it's going to wipe out the infrastructure. It's going to wipe out your electricity. It's going to wipe out this and your food and all this other crap is all going to disappear, and civilization is going to go back to being, these gangs. The New York gang versus the Connecticut gang.
That's what makes the current situation not even look so bad, is that it can't, it's like with the libertarian and market anarchist type. I mean, it can be a lot worse. We'll have the same system without any of the guarantees. They're like kludges and Band-Aids, but they did something. They quelled some bleeding.
Well,
and like right now, we don't even care. Like if some government takes somebody, used to be if that guy died in their custody, it was like, oh, we know Machiavelli, we know that even if it was an accident, and they tried to make that not happen to a certain degree. At the same time, they're assassinating other people. Now it's just like, yeah, he died in our custody, it was natural causes, and we're supposed to believe it.
I'm just saying there's still going to be plenty of human beings who are just going to be living in worse and worse conditions. So there's not going to be any victory here. Well, we're just going to diminish the human condition, because we know humans will live in absolute shit. They'll live in cardboard boxes in sewage.
Yeah, and they'll
eat garbage.
And they'll resort to having 10 kids because 7 of them die.
And that's what they'll do, exactly. So we're just going to go back to being this disgusting, primitive.
But we have enough knowledge now. We should have enough knowledge, because in the 70s, we're talking about the problem with the system, but not being a truther about it. And the difference to me is when I was a kid and there were people talking about the corruption of the system, it was a lot of rumors compared to now, where we know for a fact, and we even have current WikiLeaks kind of stuff telling us what's really going on that we already knew, that people deny, that we know at the same time. And so it seems like, isn't that enough knowledge to pull back and, on the whatever control it is that pulls the plane out before it crashes into the
Well, I know, but that's the argument, though, is that the people don't want to do the little extra amount of thinking to do the
it's difference worse than
between that. This whole look.
They do the thinking to deny it.
They want a cliche. They want a cliche. Okay. Oh,
yes.
Power corrupts. Absolutely. Absolute power. So now we have the cliche. The cliche says so. Okay. Yeah. And then whether it's like I said.
Well, that's what Lakoff is basically saying. Well, you have to invent new cliches if you want to change people's minds. And that's easier
what
said
I'm
than
saying
done.
Is that if you get people to start thinking about their psychology as just a psychology, and not about it as a mystical, free will bullshit force. No, it's something that's just a mechanical reflex, and that those reflexes can be the best part of you, or they can be the worst part of you. Once you understand that, there's a big difference between, painting a painting and taking a shit, and people aren't understanding that their brain is doing the same thing. There's parts of their brain doing something very elegant, and there's other parts of their brain doing something really crude.
Well, that's the Scientology thing I was saying. Yeah, if people could realize that it's okay to be a little bit at war with yourself because you're figuring out, and there's various urges, and we are evolving, and we aren't trying to be in the state of nature where you lose your kids to a disease that's curable.
I know it didn't work, but I liked my lizard, ape, human metaphor. Because once you recognize that there's a crude force that has no respectability, the crude bigotries that exist inside of us. And then there's this ape who's a bit of an asshole. Okay, he's a little better, but he's still going to use a brain for a hammer. He's just going to be looking out for himself, and he's going to have a very myopic view of the world. And then you got this human thing that can, telescopes and microscopes, and I can be elegant. I can understand that I'm no better than you, and I can understand all kinds of concepts. And you got to go with this human thing. You can't use your intuition, you can't use your emotional sensitivities, you can't use your sensibilities, you can't go by smell, you can't go by your sense of smell. Or
you don't think evolution is on our side for that, though? See, I say the DNA / evolutionary process has given us this thing to use, that it's sort of like, isn't evolution supposed to, we're supposed to use it?
It's completely outside of evolution.
That's where we differ always, yeah.
It didn't evolve.
Yeah.
Our capacity never evolved. Okay.
Well, I can see why you believe the
we didn't have
things
it
you
one
do.
day and then we had it the next
Based
day.
on that.
Okay. Because I can take a guy from 100,000 years ago,
Yeah.
and I can put him in a high school,
I believe
and
that.
he'll be just as smart as you.
Yeah, I believe that.
Same brain, but he was an asshole, wasn't he?
Well, no, I don't know, because that's another thing.
Well,
In
I
the
mean,
history of Earth, that's why I
I'm
like
just saying
with
he
Thomas
was an
Jefferson.
asshole, and he had no language. He had no cosmic understanding. He had no.
But I'm saying some of them did. Just like now, there was an
Not
underground.
100,000 years ago.
Yeah.
No, Pyrrho, come on.
There was an underground
Pyrrho,
back then, and we just have
Pyrrho,
never gotten the
Pyrrho.
upper hand.
Please, you're gonna hurt me. You're gonna hurt me with that.
No, I see why you would say that, and to me, that's just one of the questions. It's similar to the whole human nature question, and how much there is a human nature. And I don't really believe in human nature. We could be a bunch of different things, but there's certainly a statistical momentum and/or inertia to what human nature is, and it's a similar argument you're making with similar results, at least, that it's just an accident. So some people, even if I'm right, and there's always this underground, it's just this minority that by this accident is seeing how things are going, and the crude forces that make it go that way are still way stronger and are going to keep it going that way.
They're the agenda engine. That's another term I'm using lately.
Mm-hmm.
Is that there's two brains, right? There's the scheming tool and there's the agenda engine. So
Mm-hmm.
one part of you is giving you the need to do something, and the other part of you is giving you the strategy to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, and so the strategy engine is entirely new. That's all built on language. That's all built on education and learning how to model the world in this new way. So that's all new, and it's the agenda engine is all old.
See, but you're saying every brain then is the strategy engine, which to me is like, isn't it obviously we're not doing the right strategy?
Well, I know, but that's because we don't understand what the psychology is. So people are still listening to the agenda and using it as a scheming tool, and they're not realizing that it's a scheming tool for the whole game. We don't have to scheme as individuals. We're not individual brains playing. We're not playing a single player game. Okay, it's a multiplayer game.
But see, this is also why then I like to not give up on spirituality and the language of that, because I think that spirituality, for all of their faults, people that try to pursue something spiritual tend to at least get the rhetoric of this bigger picture. That we're supposed to scheme on this bigger picture of how things are connected, and how, and then maybe I'm scheming on things so they'll be better for my grandkid instead of me alone. And spirituality is an emotion that seems to promote that, hopefully, but even if it's gone wrong.
Yeah, but that's just misdirected, because that's more, again, about the attachments that are built out of cuteness and subjective comforts. Subjective, like, we're all raised to love the Coke song, I like to buy the world a Coke. And it's just another cliche for giving a shit, instead of giving a shit logically, understanding. So even the very idea that you would think about your grandchildren instead of about children. There's the property of is the irrelevant part.
Yeah, that's true.
The only relevant part is the child.
Well, it's still selfish, example.
I'm
in
just
an
saying,
age.
it's the lizard talking again. I'm just saying you can't keep. People have to learn to recognize when the lizard's talking, and to say, oh, okay, that's the lizard. I'll feed the lizard. I'll keep the lizard warm, but I don't respect the lizard. And that's what we have to do. Our thinking brain has to control the agenda brain to the minimum extent, to at least say, look, you can initiate action, but I'm always going to add context. I'm always going to pay attention to the context. I'm never going to do anything impulsive.
Right now, I think people are punished, and you can see just through our educational system how they're literally disproportionately bullied and stuff. People that are trying to always apply some analysis, and that's the part I don't see it going away. I mean, we could get rid of the bullying, but there's countries where there isn't as much bullying, and so you took away that symptom. Their economics is still the same thing. There's still Iceland with the same fucking bankers doing the same thing and screwing them over the same way.
I think good philosophy transcends any psychology. So I guess what I'm saying is that a minimum amount of knowledge, and once you have that minimum amount of knowledge, the knowledge of universal equality, and that it doesn't matter whether you feel good or I feel good, theoretically. I can understand that. If I was doing this as a rat experiment, I would understand that any attachment I had to a certain rat wouldn't matter. They're all rats. And if one of them has to die, it matters. You know what I mean? And the calculation of how I kill one shouldn't be because that one's cuter.
Yeah.
You know, that's bullshit. So I'm just saying that as soon as you have that minimum amount of knowledge that enables you to start looking at the world from a more objective perspective, not from your agenda engine, okay,
Yeah.
but from your knowledge of a good game, from your knowledge.
You don't think
of,
that's coming naturally at all?
Well, I don't see how it possibly can come naturally. It's a
Well,
totally,
you
it's
say
totally
it became by
unnatural.
accident to some
It's
people
totally,
already.
It didn't come by accident. It comes by the natural logical progression. We're all becoming scientists if we want to be scientists. We're all so much more informed than the best scientists of history.
Yeah.
Even commonly, we know more. So this is just a natural process of just adding the pieces together. So we all have enough pieces now. We know the whole globe. We've heard about civilizations. We've watched movies. We've seen slavery. We've been exposed to all these dynamics. So it's so easy for us to see the game. You know, we have such a huge
The thing
advantage.
is, everybody's cynical right now. Like in America, it's almost like everybody's cynical and has a bunch of knowledge of why they're cynical, and then something comes out about how they're spying on us, and suddenly, well, it's the government. They have to do that to keep
But this
us
is
safe.
all this ego
So
crap.
it seems
though.
like
It's
there's
still
this
this
dissonance.
ego shit, and it's still just about this, you know, nationalism or racism or genderism or whatever you want to tie it to. It doesn't matter. But obviously, people are still talking from their agenda engine. They're still
Or
talking
like
about
me.
what they're comfortable with. Okay, they don't. I never eat sushi, right? So I don't like sushi. So I'm reacting to the world because it's sushi, and I'm saying I'm not going to analyze it. I'm not going to recognize it as a food. I'm just going to say I don't like it. Okay, and that's how simplistic people are being and how they judge everything. They're still letting the agenda engine they're driving all their opinions from the lizard. The lizard yells it at them and they're believing it. And that's where they have to be smart enough to say, I can't listen to that lizard. Like I said, you have to feed the lizard to live. The lizard's going to give you your gratification. It's going to give you your
The
satisfaction.
lizards are coolly innocent in their cruelty.
Well, I'm just saying, you
stuff.
have to feed it.
There's a sort of innocence in their
to,
cruelty compared to the monkey that's cruel.
You have to feed it. I'm just saying you have to learn how to feed it. You know, you have to learn how to give it just what it needs and not what it wants.
I kind of think in your metaphor that we need to get rid of I mean, I love animals enough to hate to use an animal as a metaphor for this, but we're not really talking about apes or monkeys. We're talking about this part of our own psyche. It's almost like that's the part we have to clear out. It's okay, the lizard we can live with because you got to eat and you got to bask in the sun and the things the lizard does.
Yeah, you got to feel.
But you don't have to fling shit and kill your competitors' children and things like this that you see already in the simians.
Well, I'm just saying, you don't let the lizard decide behavior. You're keeping it in a cage and you're feeding it. So you're controlling its comfort. So you have complete control over having a nice, gratifying, and enjoyable life because you have it caged.
Well, I'm thinking about the actual animals.
You have it caged. You have it in a synthetic
And I've had
environment.
pet lizards, and you can
Well,
do that, and they're
saying,
happy.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
They don't wreak havoc, but try to do that with a monkey, they still wreak havoc.
I got a little turtle in that bowl over there, a little snapping turtle. Yeah, so he lives a nice, I give him what he needs. He has his comforts, okay, and he's in a safe environment. And I'm just saying we have to do the same thing for our agenda engine. We have to keep ourselves happy, but we don't let that native animal loose. And to me, it's such a simple concept. It's so obvious. Like, why would you let it loose? Why would you let a dinosaur loose in the yard or something? You know, you just wouldn't. You'd keep it on a leash. You'd keep it controlled. And so once you understand your agenda engine as a primitive mechanism, and that this part is the non-primitive, this is the good stuff. This is the Einstein shit up here. You know, live on this stuff.
You just reminded me of that video I made of you where I printed out your face. It's still one of my favorite videos I ever made.
Yeah, the French video. It's speaking in French.
And because I love Baron von Munchausen, that movie, and it used that. Did you ever see that movie?
Yeah.
And I was talking about that because that's the other thing though is that is talking about the head, where you really are feeding all the urges, but you're pretending not to. You're just above that, but you're not really. But I agree that we do really. There's a way to bring that all together and then have your final actions be mental. And that's the thing I'm saying. It's like it doesn't guarantee any kind of success. But I mean, I know when I've got lost in life, I know how I got there. You know what I mean? Oh yeah, I decided I'd climb on that cliff, and the rocks were loose, and I went down in the canyon. At least I know where I fucking am.
You know, if we had a pause button, you know, that other people could press or that we could press, you know, because it's just, all it takes is that little bit of pause where you say, what's deciding, what's making me do this? Is anger making me do this? Is, horny? What's the function that's taking place? And just recognize that, okay, maybe I should chain that up a little bit.
Well, this is what I was saying about my in real life aspect to this is that my issue has been trying to help other people, and the difficulty of that, and of carrying them through irrationality. Or my wife, that we did not have a good relationship, and I thought I was going to save her, and we did both grow, and I grew, but it was like, in the end, I was making decisions like that, but I was doing it through this filter of, okay, I'm going to accommodate this irrationality. And that's what I mean about my tolerance is being tested now, and it's also, I'm 46 or whatever, and so it's an age of my life where I don't have time to fuck around and experiment. Even if I'm wrong, I'm going to go with what I figured out so far. And the thing is, even younger, when I was more confused, decisions I've made that were within my realm or had to be, I did this way, and I'm happy with how they turned out. But the decisions I made where, I'll just trust you, okay, we'll do it your way, and you'll learn from the result, and we can learn together the way I learned this already, but now we'll go through it with you, and then you go through it and they don't learn it.
Yeah. Well, I guess, I guess my life lesson has just been one of futility, is that control is an illusion. The only thing you control is this brain shit.
Yeah.
But the real world, that's really, you're just, your good intentions are always going to be thwarted and turned upside down, and it's so delicate a balance, because you save somebody and they kill somebody else,
No, yeah, enablement.
You're just like so fucked because your influence is so frustrating.
Well, that's a more pop-sci way to put it, is that dealing with issues of enablement.
Well, it's just you can't just apply logic, because the chess pieces are 5 plays ahead. You know what I'm saying? Everything's going to happen.
Well, it comes back to the
10 or
cliches.
15.
If you had a cliche logic, and it doesn't have to be literally cliche people already know, but something like a cliche, people can follow that. But the top part of your head might not approve because it doesn't really fit together.
That's the first thing we should know, is that that's not going to work playing a complex game like chess. You can't play it based on a cliche. So that's not going to work. It is more complicated than that, and it is so complicated, there's no point in even trying to manipulate this in any, you know what I'm saying? So we're back to the end, and I just arguing, but I'm just saying that there is a part of life that you just, you have to settle for playing it badly. By no fault of your own, but you just have to settle. This is the possibility
it's a rational
that
approach,
I will totally fuck up, even though I tried to anticipate.
But people want the secret. They want to think, no, I visualized it, so it's for sure going to go right. They want that piece of art.
But isn't that just totally destructive?
That's why it's not easy to sell.
Well,
Thinking.
Well, that's dangerous, right? Yeah. So the point is, we have to make the argument that that isn't the solution. The simple answer isn't the right answer. I mean, it'd be nice if it was, but it's not.
Yeah, but I was also getting in lately to some of the things, again, that were promises from the 70s, the few that turned out, like all the Peace Corps people going out and giving condoms to people in South America and stuff. That did work. It was pretty simple. People that went and dug wells, those people got clean water. You know what I mean? There's some simple sounding things, but the complexity we're really talking about is people's emotional driving factors.
Yeah, and what happens
they don't want to use
and
these.
What happens
there's engineering solutions.
What happens 10 moves down the road where they don't maintain what they got built, and they stop using the condoms, and then everything you gave them, they now turn into...
Well, we might not know, but like if we're 10 steps down, we went on to the next thing, and then we let it decay now. I don't get it. I mean, when we were kids, this country, for all of whatever the crimes and misdemeanors of it, I don't know about the whole country, but in California, there were good schools and roads. I mean, people were actually pulling that shit off, and now it's just decaying. So it shows that 10 steps down the road, what are we, 5 steps? Yeah, so 5 more, and we're back to gangs of people in the libertarian paradise.
Well, yeah, or gangs of...
It has been proven possible to do better, though, and it's a lot of simple engineering solutions about how do I get across the river. I can build a fucking bridge that'll eventually fall down, but my kids can fix it. And we just don't do that, and we're obsessed still with blowing people up in the 21st century, and we're discussing torture and shit. Ugh. moving to the East Coast has helped me, though, not be quite as an anti-American. I was getting kind of anti-American. Now I feel like this is enough of a change for now, but probably, I don't know. I mean, I think America is worse off than just the general world situation.
I just don't see where you go in the rest of the world where it gets any better. To me,
Bhutan.
They're imitating the same mistakes. Well, you're saying Bhutan. I'm just saying. I'm not too sure.
But even Bhutan, they had like their genocide and kicked these people out and stuff. And
I'm not sure they got their boots on straight either.
No, nobody really seems to. And you can't really run away or go to the side. Or I saw the baby boomers doing their co-ops and their communes, and like hardly any of those did any well. And the ones that did were just bought out by the most ambitious one and turned into Whole Earth or whatever. So, yeah, I don't know. I think, though we are at kind of a crisis, which is another thing, could just be a cusp. We don't really know what will happen as a result of the collapse. I would like to help make it not too big of a collapse. Like you said, I mean, maybe we can at least get the gas out of drop the fuel so that the plane's lighter and doesn't burst into flames, and then maybe make a little commune around the pool.
The best hope I have is just reducing the casualties, so that's all I mean, my...
But are you giving up hope to everybody just never having more kids?
Hope, there's no hope. Well, I'm just saying I'm giving up hope. Well, no, I think people will not have kids if they, once life gets miserable enough and they still have some education, then they would not have kids. But yeah, obviously they have to put something in. Obviously the people who don't want it to happen have to stop the people who will make it happen. Yeah. So again, we're back to this argument. Most people are already anti-natalist in their behavior, and they're just not willing to impose it on the 10% who are creating the problem. So it's 10% of the population who keep making the mess.
You would say only 10%. It's more people than that have kids.
No, that have enough kids to maintain human existence.
Oh, I see. That's right. Okay, you got your mathematical thing. I remember.
They're all the surplus.
You're just trying to get to
a
1.9 level.
Well, I'm just saying those surplusers are really down there. You go down.
I don't think misery would do it though, Gary. Misery
people will just with knowledge.
They'll forget the knowledge right there. That misery, boom.
No. You just take somebody who has a little bit of taste, who's tasted the better life, and put them in the shithole. I'm just saying that,
they'll focus on raising their kids, and their kids won't know anything.
Well, I'm just saying, I don't think they will. I think they'll be scary enough. Okay, so I'm just saying, I don't think the knowledge will go to the same kind of reaction.
If I was right now, I'm saying is
ignorance makes babies.
If I wrote a sci-fi story where people became anti-natalist, it would actually be through success and being educated enough to just decide to only have one kid and do the math, and hey, the humans will be gone in 10,000 years or whatever.
I think the logic is easy enough. That
you should do that math, actually. What if people had a birth rate of 1 in the world? How long would it take to be down to the last
225 years? So it's too many. It's too long.
You're not willing to wait 225 years because we might have the answer by then.
I'm just saying, we're not gonna. Yeah, we got to do something. I got to find a magic bullet. I got to find something that goes right through people's little heads and bingo. Oh, I get it now.
Well, I would be really happy to make a tool where people could think better and decide whatever they wanted, because I'm kind of just, my judgment against people really is limited to, there's a lot of bad thinking, where people aren't even getting their own selfish desires met by their bad thinking. It's not even good enough that their schemer is actually working for that urge.
I'm just saying that the people who know better are going to have to get more comfortable with taking, they're going to have to, the bus doesn't have a driver, and they're going to have to get with the program and say, okay, I know how to drive a bus, I'll drive. It's this idea that we're just letting the dumbest, stupidest people on earth drive the bus. I mean, it's so backwards. The retards are driving the bus.
Totally. And criminal retards.
Yeah, and that's got to change, or there's just, we've got no hope at all for anything. But I'm just saying, even if we gracefully bounce and you gain flight again, there's nowhere to fly to. It still is a lizard. Okay, so you're just making you're just making lizards happy. And
there's a meadow just 100 miles.
Well, I'm just saying, what's the point of making lizards happy, right? I mean, I wouldn't populate Mars with a bunch of happy lizards.
I would.
I know, but I wouldn't. It doesn't make any fucking sense at all.
Lizards have it, but they do know how to enjoy themselves.
They rot and die like everything else.
They sunbathe.
There's no fucking point, Pyrrho.
They sunbathe.
There's no point.
Eat bugs.
It's a retarded agenda. Come on, let it go. There's nowhere to go. I'm just saying there's no singularity. There's no blah 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 blah.
Well, I don't ever see into that conclusion because I don't think it works well enough to even make that conclusion. To me, it's such a mess that
feeding off of
you'll never get rid of life.
I know, but you're still doing the same thing. You're saying I, the lizard, like chocolate.
You're never gonna get the
me like chocolate. Me like chocolate. And so you're saying the universe should have chocolate in it because you like chocolate, and it's just so obviously lizard thinking.
I know.
Okay?
But
you're just saying, I'm going to shape Mars into a chocolate bunny. I mean, what? No, that's not smart. It's stupid. You're just letting...
But you're never going to convince the lizards not to reproduce, or the amoebas. You're never going to stop them.
The point is, I say I don't have to convince them. I have to convince the thing that has the lizard on a leash. So that's why I have to get people to put the lizard on a leash. So once they have the lizard on a leash, then they can stop it. I have to give them enough knowledge in their head to say I have to put the lizard on a leash. And then once they know they have to, then they have control.
I just feel like the main problem for me right now of people, in a non-judgmental way, is that I don't think people like the Socrates know yourself thing. I don't think people understand themselves. And I would rather they figure out what they really want first. Because it's hard to see what they really want.
Well, no,
like they want to be celebrities, but they do nothing to become a celebrity. They just worship celebrities. Exactly. Things like that don't make sense.
Well, it does make sense. They want it, but they don't want to work for it. That makes perfect sense.
So stop thinking about it. Do something else.
No, because it's fun to think about it. I mean, fantasies are fun.
But it's a painful fantasy. People are going through, and
well,
then...
No, that's like saying the lottery's a painful fantasy.
It is. I hate the lottery.
Exactly. But why do you hate it? Okay.
Because
you know it's not cost effective.
Yeah, it's
right.
Not,
exactly.
Yeah, and it's not fun.
Well, I know, but people do have fun.
Because like gambling
people
in a casino,
do have fun.
Well, they shouldn't.
Well, I know, but they do.
Well,
that's why they keep doing it. That's why they keep going week after week. They go back.
I feel the same way about slot machines.
Because
I go into a casino
fun.
and
hope is fun. Shaping Mars into a chocolate bunny is fun, but it's stupid.
Maybe that's the thing then. I don't enjoy hope. I really don't enjoy hope at all. It makes me uneasy even. When people start hoping that things are going to go out, I go, this is just an excuse not to plan well. People need to plan better and hope less.
Well, I said, well, I mean, obviously I don't like the word, but I mean, I'm pausing, okay? I'm doing my Einstein thing. I'm trying to be fair to the word because I have to say that, well, obviously I live on some measure of it.
Yeah,
okay, I mean,
people have shown me that too,
some
of
point.
course.
I mean, I'm quite obviously living on some long shot that I'm going to be able to do something to navigate my life.
I'm moving to Maine. I've been there once when I was 12.
Well, exactly. So
I hope I can survive there.
So
I definitely do.
So
I'm planning to.
So I'm just saying, I don't like the concept, but I have to admit that I live on some of it.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, that's another reason I'm not good at selling stuff, like selling this idea or selling this hobby or juicing it up, because to do that, there's something that's synonymous with hope. If hope isn't the perfect word, you have to inject this hopeful idea, and that just always feels like bullshit to me. You know, I could say, here's a map. If you can walk 10 miles, I say follow this map, and if you don't get lost from the map, you'll get there. But that's different than, but I will make it, I will get lost, and giving them hope that they'll make it. I'm like, yeah, probably you could. You should be careful, you know? And so that doesn't make a good salesman.
Yeah, but I'm liking that map word, though. You know, even your software, just this whole idea of the map. You know, because that's what we're really after, isn't it? Isn't that what we're really after? Is a good map. Yeah. You know.
This is what I was talking about when I was saying maybe people are ready for some of the ideas I had 20 years ago that now they've used the computers that long. Because part of what I'm definitely going to do is just play with things I think are cool. And there are reasons, so maybe it'll be good in the end, but also, if I'm enjoying doing it, I know I can come up with the energy. You know, I don't have to hope that it'll be successful if I'm enjoying building it. And the map kind of thing is an example of where I'm saying, well, maybe I don't need to make tools for other people so much as make things like that until people like one of them. You know, and it's easy to make things now, and I've got a lot of software, and there's a point at which, you know, it's a bunch of tools, and you can build all kind of furniture. Maybe people don't want chairs. Maybe, you know, because I have come around to the thing of it'd be good to have something people did want to use and reproduce, or else it really is kind of futile. I mean, I don't think it's futile to watch after your own self in one sense, but in another sense it's ignorant because you can't. I mean, we're our shoes, who worked to make our fucking shoes. I can't pretend that it's okay just to, you know, make a living and then die. You know, I believe you have to try to work on this bigger problem, and in that sense, you know, I'm just rewording that I have to have hope in that we can pull out the plane, and I'm kind of like, you know, terminal optimism, where if we don't, we were going to wreck anyway. But if I'm not even trying to pull back on the yoke, then of course it's going to crash, and that is hope.
Well, yeah.
But I'm just not good at selling hope.
It's hope piled with a big pile of responsibility that's pushing you through the hope. You know, because that's how I'm looking at it. I'm just looking at it like, yeah, well, failure means that you're going to live in that future. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I see it as a, you know, yeah, it's not me directly, but it's going to be somebody. And
you always talk almost like you believe a reincarnation thing. I mean, your language is often that the future is putting you through something.
Like I said, I can't make it.
But that's empathy.
No.
That's you with the bigger spiritual picture of connecting with other people.
No, it's me recognizing that I can't distinguish between the rats. It's me recognizing that I'm ratting, and all these other rats are going to be ratting, and how can I make a distinction? So what's different about a future rat than a now rat? Mm-hmm. There's no difference. Oh, my name's different. Who cares? But if everybody I'm just saying, if I don't save that guy, it's still my fault. Whether it's me literally or me figuratively or not me at all.
But I just see
it just doesn't matter, because I know the tree's gonna fall and it's gonna land on the fucker. And he's gonna say,
but if more people saw that, then it would be solved.
Well, that's all I'm saying is that's my agenda, is to say this is the map of your existence.
If more people saw that, we wouldn't have to.
This is the map of your existence, okay? You are rat 4,678,000, okay? You are not fucking Mr. Magic. You are not, you know, Cleopatra reincarnated. You're just a fucking rat, okay? Now, this is what happens in the maze. If the rats don't do this selfish thing and this selfish thing and this selfish thing, and they work together, they can reduce the casualties by this number. They can reduce the, you know, harm by this number. You know, I mean, this is just economics.
Well, this is the thing. If people had that any version of that perspective, then there are simple solutions of don't do this self-destructive thing. Let's just say self-destructive even instead, because I think getting rid of selfish things probably, you know, but let's just say self-destruct. I'd like to see the world when the self-destructive parts were taken out and see if the selfishness didn't add up to there's a cupcake for everybody or not. And probably there wouldn't be, but I'd like to see the self-destructive answers. And they're there, but people have to see others. Some kid born in, you know, Africa in this, or in Saudi Arabia or some place, or North Korea.
But even born in America, we got.
I mean, someplace they think of as other already.
I'm just saying they
definitely even in America.
They don't even recognize it in their own freaking world. We've got $17 billion worth of debt.
Or town.
Well, okay, it's not a fantasy that somebody has to pay that in the future. Okay, that bomb doesn't blow up in their face.
They don't feel a connection to it.
It blows up in the future's face.
Yeah.
I mean, how can you sit there and discount their existence? How can anybody sit there with a straight, logical face and say it's okay for them to get blown up, but it's not okay for me to get blown up? I mean, you can't get any more not in my backyard than the bullshit people are
I know, at the same time, we're still in a society that's all that. But think of the children. We're
exactly.
so fucking contradictory in what we do.
It's just absolutely a lie, right? I mean, it's just a lie. They're thinking about their children, and they're figuring, I'm going to be strong enough to be there for my kids. And that's all that they're thinking. That far, like I said, don't even think about their own kids' mortality and all this other kind of crap that goes on. You know, so I mean, you know, there's so much. That's what I mean by the map of your people's lives. Your life is a lot more complicated than the crap they taught you when you were a kid. You know, the bullshit you were fed by the Flintstones is not fucking life on Earth. It just isn't. We have to go up with a better narrative than SpongeBob.
Well, my other theory has always been that really, like artists, like politically, if we could make a world. But then I found how crazy and psychotic all artists are. But I still think they're on a route, because, I mean, it's one of the few things where people get inspired to an actual new way of looking at things and placing themselves in the universe.
It's another mechanism, though. I mean, any kind of distortion. So, I mean, whether you're distorting to, like Einstein, whether you're saying, okay, I'm going to pretend to ride on a light beam, you know, and so that's a procedure you go through. And artists are doing the same kind of thing. They're basically just playing with something, saying, well, what's the contrast, or what's the manipulation? If I do this, if I distort that, does this do something, you know? So it's almost a mechanical process also of losing yourself by distorting things, changing how you react. You know, it's like walking a wobbly fence or something, and you deliberately make it wobble, you know, to force your balance. You know, but that's all we're really doing is just reacting. But you know, depending on what your objective is, it's just a different kind of creativity. You know what I'm saying? So in a way, Einstein was an artist. You know, because he had to he had to break it to make it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, he had to break the rules.
No, and he was treated like that too. They ignored it.
He had to completely break the rules to be able to see it for what it was, because if you went by the standard model, you weren't going to see it.
Well, and the weird thing with Einstein, I've simplified a bit, but pretty much all his amazing stuff was when he was still a patent clerk.
Which is disappointing.
And then when he was a professor, it did have the effect he was worried about when he was young of you know, you're with a bunch of other geniuses. It's clear to see they're geniuses, and how could that not be? You know, he's not so egotistical that doesn't have an impact on him. He didn't follow what other people were saying, but he also couldn't escape it.
That's the weird value of Einstein, though, is because I think as a philosopher he matured. You know, so later in life as a philosopher, I thought he was really good. You know, he's really eloquent. You know, and yeah, it's just kind of funny that he was really good as a scientist young, and he became a philosopher later. And so it's like those had two completely different values. But yeah, he got so lazy, from my perspective. You know, to think that, you know, the last 30 years of his life, he was just kind of naysaying, but he wasn't saying anything.
He tried again and again, yeah, but
you know.
But it got pretty sad. Like when I read his biography, I was surprised at how bad it got. It got to be like, you know, he was dealing with fellow scientists that were on the equivalent of climate change deniers or something. And maybe there's a grain of truth in that. Yeah, I mean, I do believe there's a grain of truth in the Einstein case, but it was just kind of funny. I mean, he was a very, you know, everybody that was carrying the helm of modern physics basically had gone on this other direction, and his allies had become a very small set of people that would react, for example, to reputation. And you know, of course, I'll be happy to be on the paper with Einstein.
I wish I could have been, you know, I wish I could have been a lizard on Einstein's desk and just whispered a couple of little things to him just to see if I could have got him to think a little. Because I think he got too lost in his abstractions, you know, and he needed, because he sort of broke his own rule by even imagining going the speed of light. He forgot that he was already going the speed of light. You know, that the matter in him was already going the speed of light. And if I think he would have thought about what really happens inside of an atom when you move it, how does the photons inside the electrons still move at the speed of light without going faster than the speed of light? You know what I'm saying? So
yeah,
I see that as like maybe just that might have been a critical error he made, is that he stayed with his metaphor, and his metaphor was really great for seeing some things, but it was an analogy. It wasn't the truth. You know, and so he kind of broke his own rules and then started saying, well, time dilates or this happens, and I'm saying, no, the matter changes. Okay, you didn't change time, you changed the matter. Because to make the matter go the speed of light, you've changed its configuration, you've changed its aging process, you've changed the orbits of its electrons. You know, and that's why it behaves.
Have you been working on that lately? I was watching your
I'm
videos
always fiddling with it, but I'm just saying.
It's similar to there's things in the sort of the quantum computing version of quantum mechanics now and stuff. It's similar, and there's people that work in like this cellular atomic type of idea, where basically, yeah, I mean, motion is something tunneling. You know, there is a speed of light aspect to, or even instant, you know, to how things are moving, and it's not really. It's more like you make a perfect, like the way a wave moves. It's like the water stays there, and kind of the water next to it is pushed in to make a perfect copy of the wave that came there. And yeah, and I mean, I think that's the way things are going. But I mean, the specifics are always difficult because there's all these mathematical details to see if it matches up. But the concept, the philosophy of it, I think, is winning.
I found one Feynman video where he says, well, who knows what the truth is, but I think, you know, if I was to think, that it all reduces to this checkerboard idea. And he actually said, you know, that's exactly my analogy, right? And so he actually said those words, and when he said those words, I said, okay, I can listen to this guy now. Because he's saying, just do the math, because he's saying, I'm not smart enough to figure it out, you're probably not smart enough to figure it out. But he doesn't mean it's not figure-outable.
Yeah.
He's not saying there isn't an explanation.
Yeah, no.
He's not saying there's not an explanation for why there's this clock spinning and the vectors are decided by that, and you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He's just saying he doesn't know it, and if he can't figure it out, you can't figure it out. So just accept the math and don't try to figure it out. And I think it was underestimating people by saying that. I think it was in a way saying it the wrong way.
It's also a way to relax and listen to the data, right? It's not like you can't come back and go, but here's the...
He was doing psychology instead of explicitly saying the truth, which was, this stuff's really small, we can't see what's happening, but there is something happening. Okay? It's not just probability. There's a reason.
Well, I've tried to explain that for years as far as the physicists doing quantum mechanics. The fact that there's this chance and that they argue about the rolling of dice is kind of a big red herring, because they're not saying they have a theory where they're figuring everything out this way, and they're really resorting to statistics, and the statistics are, you know, as determinable, and the fact that there's always a 1 in a million freak chance doesn't mean you can't plan to drive into Inmendham and get some cigarettes. You know, I mean, you can make those plans, and yeah, there's a 1,000,000 chance that the sun's going to blow up on the way, but you know, and so the randomness they advocate is really so at the edges. It's not like the randomness of people that are saying suddenly you'll figure out something and teleport.
Well, I'm just saying that I think Feynman...
Like the things don't have reasons. They're not saying things don't have reasons.
I'm just saying that, yeah, I think it does all break down to something very mechanical, and it even forces are an illusion. That when you get to the basic mechanism, you're going to find that there is literally... Okay, the electron is literally tied to the nucleus. That there's a string of photons or something else that's actually forcing the orbit.
Well, see, that's very quantum
well, I'm just saying, unlike our gravity that looks like it's all invisible, what's invisible because we can't see any of this shit.
Yeah.
Okay, but on the level of the frickin' atoms themselves, it's all mechanical structures. There's actual bridges.
But you use the word mechanical, and it's more like fluid mechanics is the problem. It's not the mechanics of a watch.
I'm saying it's as rock solid as a piece of steel. No, it is not fluid at all.
I think it's fluid dynamics, and that it's the same thing, though. Why can't you get certainty?
Fluid, you can't have fluid on a checkerboard.
Well, that's why quantum mechanics is so, like, impossible to understand, because there's this checkerboard, discrete, of photons all alone, and then there's the wave mechanics of it. Looks like a wave.
It's not a wave mechanic. The wave mechanics.
Well, wave mechanics is just
a property of the photon. The only reason why the quantum mechanics works is because there's this presumption that one photon is the same as another photon, and that's the lie. Every photon is different, and it's different in 16 or 17 different ways. You make up the number, it doesn't matter. But every photon has its own character. There's strong, weak, double strong, and that's why people are fucking up, is because they're doing quantum mechanics on the presumption that all photons are the same. And that's a big mistake.
They emphasize a lot about that, the sameness. They're all unique in some respect, but basically they're also very much the same.
Well, I'm just saying, I noticed that when I look, I can't do quantum mechanics, but I'm just saying when I did my analysis of it, that's the first thing that popped out to me, was that there's always a presumption that there's no variable inside the photon. They're all the same, and all the variables have to come from the outside. That's where they're forcing the variables to come from, and that's the mistake, in my opinion.
Interesting.
Photons are changed by every interaction they have.
So well, I think your physics theories are kind of crazy, but I like your philosophy that leads you to do it.
Well, the last two slit, I did a two-slit video on the one channel. I did another one to sense it, but I pointed out that they do that little hole thing, where they have the gun here, shoots the photons through the hole, and then there's the two slits, right?
To mask
and so you would argue, what's this hole doing? Yeah. All right, because the first obvious for me is that it's creating interactions. So you're changing the photons. That's changing the photons. The ones that are closer to the edge are going to be different than the ones that went right through the middle. Yeah. You know, and so that's your. Well, I'm just saying that's your first filter. So now you've created a filter, and you're surprised you have a filtered result. Okay, filters create filtered results. And so you're filtering the photons. And as soon as you start filtering, then you're going to start getting bands. With every change. Well, anyway, I'm just, like I said, I don't want to do that. I'm saying I'm getting close. That's all I'm going to say. I think I'm getting close to something. It might be bullshit, but it looks like the pieces are, I got like a piece here, and I got a piece here, and I'm seeing something. I'm seeing a connection.
Well, I mean, You could always, I think there's a lot of stuff still to discover by taking a philosophical approach. I mean, that is how Einstein broke it down. You know, going back to this basic.
I'm cheating on Einstein.
And it's very much philosophy
and I'm
at that
cheating
point.
on Einstein, right? Because what got me to thinking about it was the fact that this stupid Einstein metaphor, you know, of traveling on a light beam.
Yeah.
And I said, of course you can't do that, because my matter can't do that.
Yeah.
And why can't matter do that? Because matter's already moving at the speed of light. It was such an obvious answer, right? I mean, it seems obvious, right? It's already moving the speed of light. How the fuck can it possibly go the speed of light when it's going the speed of light?
Well, it's funny because I don't believe my own thoughts on this per se, but I've always had some idea that, you know, E equals mc squared means that you captured this energy, and energy still wants to be moving in this infinitely smooth,
well, let's say it has
slippery
to.
way.
Let's say it has to. Let's say it has to move. It doesn't have a choice. The light must always move, and the only thing you can do is catch it.
Well, in quantum mechanics, it's kind of like that. Everything's moving like that, but there's a standing way.
Catch it. All you have is one thing. You have photon.
Well, and like the electron is that. It is a thing that gets caught, and it is moving
right,
around.
and the electron, imagine the electron as a double helix. Okay, so we can use the double helix again. Imagine the electron just made out of photons on a double helix. So the photons are moving the speed of light, but at the same time they're spinning. Right? So the faster they spin, the slower they move. Right? The slower they spin, the faster the electron moves. So the speed of the electron is dictated by the spin of the photons inside of it. To me, it's a perfect explanation of the variable speed of electrons.
Yeah, that's interesting, because you could do some math with regular physics to that, because the electron has a wavelength. You could figure out how much. Well, you need to figure out like what the size, the geometry of that little of the
and the
wavelength.
The wavelength could be the axes on the helix.
Well, it's the wavelength would for sure be
helix,
how fast it's spinning, right?
Exactly, but I'm just saying the helix.
If it has a really fast thing, then that means it's
the helix has this automatic. You know what I mean? It can tend to have an automatic wavelength built into it.
Yeah.
You can have a helix that has nodes, and it has the wide, the amplitude node and the narrow node. So you could have the wavelength built in. So you could have photons of infinite wavelengths, variable wavelengths, built into a physical structure that will force them to break at certain wavelengths. So when you exchange photons, a big one could come in, okay, and you pop out a little one.
You should write a simulation, a JavaScript simulation to visualize
yeah, exactly.
Because that is the other thing that's kind of cool. I mean, when we were kids, they were still saying that there isn't geometry to the atom. Just stop thinking about that. Now they're back to, the molecules have shape and they wiggle and they're little gel.
But this is the problem. I mean,
they have geometry again.
I know, but
they have sizes.
Look what they've done to the standard model, though. They've turned it into this preposterous thing where they've included into it a bunch of things they've discovered with these stupid accelerators. The particles that only last a blank constant in time. That's how long they survive.
Yeah.
So they're so eccentric and so unnatural, and yet they're considering them natural products. They're considering them natural.
Well, just because they predicted they'd see that if they were right about how stuff worked.
Well, no, they're not doing it that way.
Yeah.
Okay, they're doing that based on the same presumptions of all photons are the same and all mass has to equal energy and all that kind of crap. So they're just doing it by the crudest standards. What I'm saying, though, is all they've done is broken things and created unnatural lengths of electron. You know what I'm saying? Lengths that could never exist in an atom or in nature.
Well, but they've explained that. They're
well, I'm just saying they've broken, the mechanics, and then said the part is a real part. And it's not really a real part. It's an eccentric part that they've created by exploding the damn thing. I mean, obviously the bumper always flies off the car in one piece. Doesn't mean, that the bumper makes the car move.
Yeah. There's an argument to that. The thing is, they have pieced everything together so well. You do have to contend with the system.
They only pieced it together so well is because they forced it to piece together.
Well, not
so
entirely.
well.
I mean, for example, with the LHC, it's killing all these superstring theories. They're all dead. Because they predicted particles they weren't seen. But the standard theory just predicted one particle left that hadn't been seen, and they've seen that. So whether it's a particle or not, and that's a confusion or not, it's still true that they don't always get to see what they want to see. I mean, all these string theorists are fucked now.
All they're seeing is
supersymmetry. You remember that?
Yeah.
That's what every physicist thought 30 years ago. They were all getting on board, and now those supersymmetry theories none of the particles that
I'm
they
just saying
predict
it's all
have been
made
seen.
out of the same crap, and so I'm just saying if I say a photon is like I say it's like I like using the ring example. Okay, magician rings they're locked together, so electrons could have an open end, and one end overlaps the other end, so it's like a hook. So it runs into something and hooks right into it. So there's a mechanical bond, between the two electrons that way, because now they're hooked inside of each other and they can't escape each other unless they're exactly the right point.
Because there's this weird thing with electrons and pairing and.
So I'm just saying that they take something like that. They take this two rings and they throw it through this accelerator, and what I'm saying is all they're getting is broken pieces of electron. They're not getting a real particle. They're getting the mechanics.
No, I understand
of an
what you're
electron.
saying, see, this is why I like wave mechanics, because if you're saying everything is wave mechanics, then yeah, when you throw the, when the wave's coming and you splash it away and make it away, you get splashes of water, and you can't say that that's really that much about the wave. And so it's a similar kind of an argument. Like they're calling it an unstable piece just because they haven't never got a smaller piece.
Well, and the reason why it has to disintegrate.
But it still means that like the ring is made of that thing in some sense. Like that's the material, that's the metal.
It can never exist as half a ring. Okay, it can never exist as half a ring. So that's what I'm saying is once they break it, okay, it has to reform into a ring, or it has to disintegrate, but it can't maintain itself in the condition you put it in.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm saying.
Well, and they just express that as
I'm just saying.
instability.
So yeah, I know, but they're not. What I'm pointing out, what I'm attempting to point out, is that it's not, in terms of modeling an atom, this isn't the real part. Okay, it's like